But Baalbek, if there was one example, one ancient site on Earth that is evidence of a lost ancient advanced civilization.
This is Baalbek in the Lebanon. Each of these 3 blocks weighs 900 tons.
There is a stone in a quarry in Lebanon that weighs 1,650 tons. It has never moved, still attached to the bedrock where someone cut it thousands of years ago, possibly far older than we think. Nobody knows who left it there, why they did it, or how they ever planned to move something so massive in the first place.
This block and another 2 are actually far older than the Roman period.
Do you believe ancient humans really had the technology to move stones like this? Yes or no? Let us know in the comments. The stones themselves. To understand why Baalbek has confused serious researchers for centuries, start with the numbers. Not the history, not the theories. Just the numbers, held long enough to feel their actual weight.
And Baalbek has the largest stones that were ever quarried in human history, the largest stones that were lifted, stacked, and transported in human history, and the largest stone columns in all of classical history.
The Trilithon is the name given to 3 enormous stones forming part of the foundation platform at the temple complex of Baalbek in modern Lebanon. Each stone is approximately 19 meters long, 4 meters high, and 3.5 meters thick. Each weighs somewhere between 750 and 800 tons laid side by side with a precision that has become one of the most cited details about the site. You cannot fit a sheet of paper into the gaps between them. 3 stones, each the size of a small apartment building, fitted together with tolerances acceptable in modern precision engineering. For a sense of what that weight means, consider the Great Pyramid of Giza. The heaviest stones there weigh approximately 80 tons. Moving one required genuine engineering intelligence and substantial organized labor. The Trilithon stones weigh roughly 10 times that. Not 10% more, 10 times. At a certain point, the difference between what you can do with ropes and ramps and human muscle and what you cannot stops being a matter of degree and becomes a matter of kind. The Trilithon stones are not even the largest at the site. In the quarry approximately a kilometer from the temple platform, 3 stones were cut and never moved. The stone of the pregnant woman, named, for reasons rooted in local folklore rather than archaeology, weighs around 1,000 tons. The stone of the south, rediscovered during the 1990s survey work, comes in at roughly 1,240 tons. Then there is the stone found in 2014 by the German Archaeological Institute during systematic quarry mapping, just under 20 meters long, an estimated 1,650 tons. It has no popular name. It is simply the largest worked stone identified anywhere in the ancient world, still sitting where it was cut, partially separated from the bedrock as though work stopped mid-task. One detail makes the engineering problem harder to dismiss. The quarry sits slightly uphill from the temple platform. Moving any stone to its foundation position meant moving it against the natural gradient first. Theories about transport involve timber rollers, earthen ramps, and large organized workforces. Those theories face serious physical challenges at 1,000 tons. At 1,650, they stop being theories and become questions. The stones are there. Something put the Trilithon stones in position. The how remains formally open. That open question is where the real argument begins. The mainstream case. The mainstream archaeological position on Baalbek is more carefully argued than popular treatments usually give it credit for. It does not simply wave its hand at Roman ambition and call the question settled. It makes a specific case based on specific evidence, and that case deserves to be understood clearly before examining what it does and does not explain. The Trilithon and the broader megalithic foundation platform are dated by mainstream archaeology to the Roman period through multiple independent lines of evidence. The architectural style is consistent with Roman construction methods observed across the empire. The stratigraphic context places the stones within a Roman period construction sequence, and there is direct epigraphic evidence. A graffito found at the site indicates the major construction phase was approaching completion around 60 AD during the reign of Nero. The site's importance to Rome was substantial. Baalbek was known to the Romans as Heliopolis, the city of the sun, one of the most significant pilgrimage destinations in the Eastern Empire. drawing worshippers from across the Mediterranean world. The scale of investment Rome made there was proportional to how much the site mattered to Roman religious and political identity. Building extraordinarily was how Rome demonstrated its relationship with the divine. Roman engineers were capable of working at impressive scales. They extracted enormous sections of rock from quarries across the empire using a systematic methodology. Lines scored in stone with chalk, channels cut along those lines, wooden or iron wedges inserted at intervals, and a central strike that split the rock cleanly along the intended fracture. Archaeologist Margaret Van Es has argued in published work that the cutting method visible at the Baalbek quarry is consistent with the same technique used to produce the stone blocks of the Pont de Gare, the Roman aqueduct in southern France that still stands today. The specific scale of the stones, the mainstream argument continues, is explained by the site's geology. Baalbek sits on karst terrain, a limestone landscape characterized by underground water movement that creates hidden voids and structural irregularities beneath the surface. Building a stable foundation for a temple complex of the scale, Rome required stones massive enough to bridge those voids and distribute weight broadly enough to prevent settling. The stones are so large because the ground required them to be. That argument is coherent, supported by evidence, and explains the scale in terms of identifiable practical requirements rather than mystery. It also leaves certain things unexplained that are worth sitting with directly. The path from coherent argument to settled question is longer than the mainstream position sometimes suggests. Demonstrating that Rome had a reason to build at this scale is not the same as demonstrating that Rome had a known method capable of moving stones at this weight. The case for who and why is considerably stronger than the case for how. The alternative case. Look at a photograph of the Baalbek temple complex from the right angle and something is immediately visible. The foundation platform looks different from the Roman construction sitting on top of it. Different in texture, different in scale. The limestone in the lower courses is more weathered, cut in a style that does not match the upper stonework in ways several researchers have found difficult to attribute to a single continuous construction project. That visual difference is the entry point for the alternative position, that the megalithic foundation predates Rome by a significant margin. The history of human settlement at Baalbek is not in dispute. Archaeological evidence confirms continuous human presence going back approximately 10,000 years. Bronze Age settlements have been dated to as far back as 2900 BCE. Canaanite occupation is documented across both the ancient and Middle Bronze Age periods. The place has mattered to successive cultures across an enormous span of time. Graham Hancock, the most publicly prominent advocate for the position that the megaliths predate Rome, argues the foundation platform may be contemporaneous with Göbekli Tepe in southern Turkey, now firmly dated to approximately 12,000 years ago and recognized as the oldest large-scale stone construction yet identified. His argument is not that aliens or lost civilizations built the platform. It is that the timeline of human construction capability has already been pushed back considerably from where it stood a generation ago, and that the assumptions built into the conventional Baalbek dating deserve examination in that light. Honest accounting of Hancock's position requires noting what the evidence does and does not support. No excavation has produced doubtable material from directly beneath the trilithon that would establish a pre-Roman construction date. The full foundation has not been excavated. Pre-Roman occupational layers are confirmed beneath the broader complex, but pre-Roman construction of the trilithon specifically remains unestablished by direct physical evidence. Absence of evidence and evidence of absence are different things. The question remains open in the specific technical sense that it has not been closed by direct investigation. There is one detail the mainstream explanation has consistently struggled to address. The Romans were prolific documenters of their own achievements. They recorded the logistics of major construction projects in writing that has survived. The transportation of the trilithon stones, if carried out by Rome, would have been by any measure the greatest single feat of stone moving in Roman engineering history. The largest stone Rome moved elsewhere, Egyptian obelisks transported to the capital, weighed around 53 tons. The trilithon stones are 15 times heavier. No surviving Roman document describes moving them. What the 2014 excavation changed the work of the German Archaeological Institute at Baalbek, which has been ongoing in partnership with the Lebanese Directorate General of Antiquities, shifted the conversation in 2014 in ways that cut across the simple binary between the mainstream and alternative positions. The quarry mapping project that identified the 1,650-ton stone produced more than a new weight record. The systematic documentation of how the stones were cut revealed something about the technical knowledge of whoever was doing the cutting. The blocks were not simply extracted from the nearest available rock face at whatever size and angle the rock naturally offered. They were cut at specific orientations chosen to follow the internal grain structure of the limestone in ways that minimize the risk of fracturing during extraction. That is not brute force applied to a large rock face. That is a sophisticated reading of the stone's internal structure, the kind of knowledge that in modern quarrying operations requires geological survey and analysis before a single cut is made. The same mapping and geophysical survey work confirmed pre-Roman occupational layers beneath the Roman structures across the broader complex. Those layers do not prove that the trilithon itself predates Rome. What they establish is that the construction history of the site is genuinely multi-layered, and that simplifying that history to a single Roman period building project misrepresents what the physical evidence actually shows. The precise purpose of the largest quarry stones remains an active research question. Whether the 1,650-ton stone was destined for the temple podium or for some other structural purpose has not been established. It may have been cut for a position in the foundation that required dimensions different from the trilithon stones already in place. It may have been intended for a phase of construction that was never completed. The quarry mapping provides information about what was cut and how it was cut. The question of what it was for and why it was left behind remains open. What 2014 gave the conversation was more evidence and more precise questions. It moved the discussion away from the general toward the specific, which is the direction all productive archaeological inquiry has to move eventually. Why this place has always been sacred. The name Baalbek carries its own information. Baal is the name of a Canaanite deity, one of the most significant figures in the pre-Israelite religious landscape of the ancient Near East. Bek, in the regional linguistic context, refers to sources of water, specifically to springs. Baalbek is, at its root, the place where the Lord of the gods meets abundant fresh water. Water in the ancient Middle East was not simply a practical resource, it was a theological statement. Permanent, reliable fresh water made a place sacred across every culture that inhabited the region, because the presence of water in an otherwise difficult landscape was understood as direct evidence of divine favor. The site's holiness was so universally recognized that the Romans, who had a well-documented policy of absorbing and incorporating local religious traditions rather than replacing them wholesale, did not arrive at Baalbek and install a Roman god in place of Baal. They created a hybrid, Baal Jupiter, a deity who carried both names and both traditions simultaneously. The Romans built their temple of Jupiter at Baalbek not on neutral ground but on the foundation of a sacred site that had been accumulating religious significance for thousands of years before their legions arrived. They were not creating the site's holiness, they were participating in it. That context matters for understanding the stones. The scale of the megalithic platform is often framed purely as an engineering puzzle, a question of how. But the how exists inside a why. Whoever cut those stones and placed them in that configuration was making a statement about how much this particular piece of ground mattered. Scale in ancient monumental construction is not random, it is proportional to significance. The places that warranted the most extreme construction effort were the places whose holiness was most firmly established and most widely shared. Baalbek had been one of those places for so long that by the time the trilithon was constructed, the tradition of treating this valley as sacred was already ancient. The stones are, among other things, a record of what this location has meant to every culture that has ever stood in front of it. The engineering question that will not close. Experimental archaeology has produced some of its most impressive demonstrations around the question of how ancient people moved large stones. Researchers have shown that timber rollers, ropes, earthen ramps, and organized human labor can move stones that initially seem impossible to shift. These demonstrations are genuine contributions to understanding ancient capability. They also have a scaling problem that the Baalbek question makes impossible to ignore. What works at one weight does not automatically work at 10 times that weight. The physics of moving large objects do not scale simply. Friction, structural integrity of the moving surface, the mechanical limits of rope and timber, the coordination demands of large labor forces, all of these factors become harder to manage as the weight increases, and they do not become harder in a linear way. There are thresholds beyond which methods that worked perfectly well at smaller scales become physically inadequate, and the question of whether known ancient methods cross those thresholds at Baalbek's weights has not been answered by experimental demonstration. The largest stone moved in any experimental archaeology demonstration sits well below the weight of the trilithon blocks. The gap between what has been demonstrated and what Baalbek requires is not a small one. Mainstream archaeology acknowledges in careful published work on the subject that there is no current consensus explanation for the precise mechanism by which the trilithon stones were transported and placed. The what, who, and the why have plausible mainstream answers. The how remains genuinely and formally unresolved. No ancient text describes the transportation process. No Roman engineering manual includes a section on moving stones at this weight. No account from any period of antiquity describes watching the trilithon blocks move from quarry to platform. The largest construction achievement in the ancient world, if the Roman dating is correct, left no procedural record in a civilization that recorded its engineering projects with considerable care. That silence is not proof of anything on its own. Records are lost. Documents decay. The absence of a written account of the trilithon's transportation does not establish that the Romans did not transport it. But in a civilization as thorough in its self-documentation as Rome, the silence around an achievement of this scale is a detail that sits uncomfortably with easy resolution. The frozen building site. Return to the quarry. 3 stones cut and never moved. The largest one, the 1,650-ton stone found in 2014, shows no structural flaw that would explain why it was abandoned. It did not crack during cutting. It was not found to be unsuitable for its intended purpose after the extraction was underway. It was simply left. The cutting stopped. The project, whatever its full scope was, did not reach this stone. There are a few possible explanations. The project was completed without needing this stone, and it was simply surplus to the final design. The project was interrupted by conflict, by plague, by the death of the authority organizing it, by some disruption significant enough to halt work at the quarry permanently. Or the project was part of a construction plan that extended beyond what was ultimately built, a more ambitious original design that was scaled back before the largest stones could be moved. None of those explanations is provable from current evidence. All of them are consistent with what the quarry shows. What the quarry shows most clearly is not a ruin. A ruin is the end product of something that was completed and then deteriorated. The Baalbek quarry looks like an interruption. Dressed stones lying where they landed. Tools, if any were left, long since taken or decayed. The work stopped at a specific moment for reasons that no surviving record explains, and the stones have been waiting in the same position ever since. The image worth sitting with is not a collapsed temple or a worn inscription. It is a construction site where the workers simply did not come back. Whatever they were building, they knew how to cut stone at a scale that has not been matched anywhere in the ancient world. Whatever stopped them left no explanation behind. What Baalbek actually means. The layered answer to the question of who built Baalbek is the honest one, and it is considerably more interesting than either the simple mainstream answer or the simple alternative answer. The Romans built the temples. That is well supported by the available evidence, and the temples themselves are extraordinary achievements that deserve recognition on their own terms, independent of the megalithic foundation debate. A pre-Roman civilization, Hellenistic, Phoenician, or possibly significantly older, likely shaped the platform those temples rest on. The visual difference between the megalithic foundation and the Roman construction above it, the absence of Roman documentation of the trilithon's construction, and the confirmed pre-Roman occupational layers beneath the complex all point toward a construction history that extends before Rome's arrival at the site. And underneath all of it, going back 10,000 years and beyond, human beings kept returning to this valley. Whatever was happening here before the first stone was cut, before the first temple was planned, before the Romans gave it a Latin name and dedicated it to a hybrid god. This place was already recognized as somewhere that mattered. The stones are the largest physical expression of that recognition. They are not the beginning of the story. In November 2024, UNESCO granted Baalbek provisional enhanced protection under the Second Protocol to the Hague Convention, a designation prompted by the ongoing conflict in Lebanon and the direct threat it poses to the site's physical integrity. A UNESCO evaluation mission in March 2025 assessed the impact of that conflict on the complex. The site is not a stable historical artifact safely preserved behind barriers. It is an active archaeological site in an active conflict zone, still yielding new information, still being studied, and currently under genuine threat. The research is ongoing. The largest stones have not given up all of their information. The foundation has not been fully excavated. The questions that remain open are not open because no one has thought carefully about them. They are open because the evidence needed to close them has not yet been recovered. The stone in the quarry. The 1,650-ton stone is still in the quarry, still attached to the bedrock at one end where the cutting was never completed, still waiting for an explanation that the full weight of modern archaeological research has not yet produced. It is not waiting dramatically. It is not mysterious in any theatrical sense. It is simply a very large piece of cut limestone lying in a hillside outside a Lebanese city, more carefully shaped than it has any obvious reason to be. Heavier than anything any known ancient civilization has been demonstrated to move, pointed in the direction of a temple platform it never reached. The people who cut it understood the stone they were working with at a level of technical sophistication that the 2014 excavation made impossible to dismiss. They knew where to cut to avoid fracturing. They knew what the stone's internal structure required. They cut at that scale, apparently, with a regularity that the quarry's output suggests was normal rather than exceptional for them. Whatever they were building, they were very good at it. Whatever stopped them left no explanation. And the stone they left behind is still asking the question they walked away from, in the only language available to 1,650 tons of cut limestone: silence, precision, and scale. 3 stones in a temple wall that no known crane could lift. 3 more in a quarry that never moved, a 1,650-ton block still fused to the bedrock, a Roman civilization that documented everything and left no account of its greatest achievement. Baalbek does not offer easy answers. It offers better questions. Subscribe so you never miss the next one.